almost 160,000 square kilometers that are deeply rich in natural resources located on the southeastern part of Venezuela that it claims from its first independence because it was subject to pillage in the colonial times with the intervention of the United States and UK. In 1996, an agreement was executed as diplomatic contacts between the parties because Venezuela has wanted to reestablish contact, while Guyana, especially in the last government, has threatened with sanctions if Venezuela does not file impositions on the International Court of Justice in the Netherlands. This is a history of successive oil explorations and exploitations of transnationals like ExxonMobil that report huge dividends and operate on the coasts illegally because there is an agreement, the one we were mentioning in Geneva, that explicitly acknowledges the dispute and assumes a territory that which sovereignty is claimed. This weekend, there were two facts news, Exxon ship traveling in Venezuelan waters, accepted by Guyana, and the parliament dissolves this government of Guyana. Energy occupation in the Caribbean, actors and interests in our critical move for today. Last Saturday, December 22, usually we patrol in Venezuela. A national ship devised the unprecedented presence of two seismic exploration ships in Venezuelan waters. Both had been contracted by ExxonMobil. When they were stopped, the captains argued that they had a license from Guyana to be in the water, but that country has no jurisdiction in the Orinoco Delta. In the end, the tasks were suspended and the ships returned in waters that Guyana assumes are like theirs. Venezuelan Minister of Foreign Affairs, Arreaza, the same day they intercepted the two ships, published the government's position, which we see on the screen. In case of the flagrant violation of our sovereignty by oil exploration ships contracted by Guyana, the Bolivarian Navy proceeded to apply the corresponding protocols with strict attachment to international agreements and treaties. And following this communication, there is a diplomatic note of protest against Guyana that urging its government to return to their waters and respect the interests of Venezuela. We're talking about Esequibo, which on one side is assumed de facto territory, on the other hand is a territory in dispute. Why?
Guayana Esequiba, territorio Esequibo,
Esequiba, Guyana territory, or region. This is the Guyana Esequiba shield located in a buffer zone for Guyana between the west of the Esequibo River and the geographic marker of the Roraima Mountain. It is 160,000 square kilometers. It is a maritime area and territory rich in petroleum. It has minerals and forests. The territory represents 3/4 of the west of Guyana, which government has a de facto administration, but historically, sovereignty has been claimed by the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela as a part of the jurisdiction of the eastern state Bolívar and Delta Macuro. It is based on the Geneva Agreement on February 17, 1966, that acknowledges the dispute between the parties and the creation of a mixed commission to find a solution
y declara al mismo tiempo nulo el laudo
favorable for
arbitral
both
dictado en
parties
1899 en
and
París.
annuls
Es así como
the
Venezuela en
law
sus mapas ilustra el área
issued in
rayada
Paris in
oblicuamente o con
1989.
una aclaratoria en forma de leyenda que reza zona en reclamación. Solo
It
la
is
parte
called a
oriental de la
zone
isla
in
fluvial de
claim.
Anacoco en el río
Only
Cuyuní
the
está bajo
Anacoco in
soberanía
Uyuni
venezolana.
is under
Venezuela incluye
Venezuelan
el territorio
sovereignty.
dentro de sus
Venezuela
dominios desde su
includes the
primera
territory
constitución,
inside
la de
its domain since its
1811,
first
y en el caso
constitution
de
in
Guyana, cuando era colonia
1811,
británica,
and when
Gran Bretaña
Guyana
cartografió
was a
políticamente a su
British
favor en
colony,
1938, reconociendo
it
como límite
recognized
occidente
as a
al río
western limit
Esequibo.
the Esequibo River.
Portal del canal
The
estatal venezolano
webpage of
PTV
PTV.
informaba hace algunas horas. Venezuela
Some
rechaza
hours
comunicado del
behind
Departamento de Estado de Estados
was
Unidos sobre
reporting
nuestra
Venezuela rejects
Apenas se
the
supo de la
U.S.
incursión de los
State
buques, Venezuela
Department
les interceptó en
news
resguardo
on
propio.
national
Estados Unidos no dudó en
sovereignty.
pronunciarse
United
a través de un
States
portavoz del
pronounces
Departamento
through
de
a
Estado
spokesman of the
llamado
State
Robert
Department called
Este
Robert
día Twitter
Palladino
abogó por el
via
derecho de
Twitter
Guyana a
that
explorar y explotar
claimed
recursos en sus
Guyana's
aguas
right to
territoriales. La
exploit
pregunta es si
resources
son
in its
realmente sus aguas
territorial waters.
territoriales.
The question
Es
is
zona
if
económica
it's
bueno, las coordenadas de
Guyana's
ubicación de los
territorial
movimientos que
waters.
fueron
The
hallados por la
coordinates
Armada
of the
Nacional
location
Bolivariana
when the
dicen que no es
Bolivarian
jurisdicción
Navy
constitutiva
found
de
them
Hubo también un
definitely
comunicado
denies that
que Venezuela
jurisdiction.
calificó de impertinente e
Venezuela
incongresivo en
rejected
otro
this
texto oficial emitido por su Cancillería
note
impostó
and
a todas luces es evidente que el
responded
gobierno de Estados Unidos interfiere a
saying that the
conveniencia en un
U.S.
asunto que le produce su
government is
incumbencia con el
interfering
fin de
in
promover
matters
intereses
that has
corporativos
nothing to
vinculados
do with its
carnalmente
interests
con la élite gobernante en
with the
Washington, sin
aim
reparar en las más elementales normas del derecho internacional técnico.
to protect
Y dice también,
private interests.
hacemos
It
el
also
llamado a las
says we
autoridades estadounidenses
urge the
a
U.S.
mantenerse al
authorities
margen de
to
las
keep
relaciones entre estados soberanos y
outside the
ocuparse de
relations of
asuntos
sovereign
de problemas internos.
states.
Me voy ahora a casa
I will now go
reseñaba
telesurtv.net
oposición de
that
Guyana
called
gana moción de censura contra el gobierno.
Guyana's
Decía que era
opposition
uno de los
earns a
hechos que había
motion
marcado
of
pauta
censure
en las
against the
horas
government
precedentes, y es que
in these last
coincidencialmente por
hours.
presunto despilfarro
By
de recursos
coincidence,
petroleros
because
y
of
entreguismo a
oil
la Exxon
resource
Mobil, el Parlamento de Guyana
pillage,
aprobó el
the
impulsado
Guyana
por el
Parliament
presidente David Gra- por lo que su gobierno
approved
deberá abandonar el poder, es decir, queda disuelto y tendrán que
dissolving the
celebrarse
government
elecciones
and
a más
calling
tardar su venidero para
elections
elegir a quién
in
su sucesor o sucesora.
the coming
Según medios
weeks.
internacionales, la moción
According
fue
to
presentada
international
por
media, the
Barak
motion
Yardeo,
was presented
líder
by
del opositor
Barachak
Partido
Bell,
Progresista
leader
del
of
Pueblo,
the
por cierto fue
opposition
presidente,
party, who was already
obtuvo
president.
resultado de
He
33
had
votos a favor y
33
62 en
votes in
contra.
favor and
Es la
32
primera vez en la
against.
historia de
It's the
Guyana que
first time
prospera
in the
una
history
iniciativa de
of
esta naturaleza y
Guyana
queda
that
removido
this
un
kind of
gobierno por
petition
esta vía.
is
Y
accepted and a
finalmente,
government is removed by
migramos
this
a
way.
Misión Verdad, portal
Now we
venezolano
will
de
go to
investigación,
Misión
que
Verdad,
titula
a
uno de sus
research
trabajos sobre este tema, porque tiene varias
webpage,
publicaciones.
one
El
of its
petróleo del
publications
Esequibo
on the
venezolano
matter.
salva
The
las
oil of
finanzas de
Venezuelan
Esequibo. Es
Esequibo
lo que
saves
Stabroek,
ExxonMobil's
donde ExxonMobil ha
finances.
explorado y encontrado al menos
Stabroek
5
block,
pozos
where
para
ExxonMobil
su
has
extracción de
explored
crudo,
and found at
está
least
en
5
esa
wells
zona
for
por
its
la cual
crude
Venezuela y Guyana
extraction, is
mantienen
in
una
the zone
disputa
whereby
legal por
Venezuela and
territorial.
Guyana
El
hold
pozo
a legal
petrolero
dispute
Turbo
for
Tuado,
a
hallazgo
territorial
reciente de la
referendum.
petrolera estadounidense,
The recent
esto fue en los
finding
primeros
of
días de
the
agosto,
oil
también
company
estaría
the
en la
first
zona en
days of
disputa y
August is
afianza la
also
fachada
in the
atlántica del
dispute
Esequibo como
zone
una zona energética
and
de
has called
importancia global.
global
Las ganancias que prevé
energetical
conquistar
significance.
ExxonMobil en mediano plazo, que son los
ExxonMobil
afectados que recibiría por la actividad
would
petrolera,
receive
el gobierno guyanés
large income
podrían
with
influir
this
para que las
oil, and
negociaciones
the
entren
Guyanese
en una u
government
otra
could
etapa
influence
judicial.
for
Allí
this
vemos
to start a
de
judicial
manera
phase.
anticipada qué intereses
We see
están en juego.
what
Al
interests
menos
are
en
at
estas
stake,
primeras informaciones o primeros datos.
at
La
least with
víspera de
these
Navidad
first
se daba este
information.
hecho
Before
muy, pero muy
Christmas,
cuestionado
we
por
saw this
Venezuela
fact
y
that was
que
questioned by Venezuela,
definitivamente, les
and
decía,
that
marcaba la
marked
pauta. A ver,
the
vamos
road.
a establecer contacto con
We are
nuestro
going to
corresponsal
contact
en
our
capital
correspondent
venezolana,
in
Luis
Caracas,
Tavera.
Luis
Hola,
Tavera.
Luis. ¿Qué
Hello,
otros datos
Luis.
tenemos
What
para aportar?
other data do we have?
Un saludo para ti, Lucía, y para la audiencia que
Greetings for
sintoniza
you,
las
Lucia,
pantallas de
and
Telesur a esta
the
hora. Una vez
viewers.
más,
Once again, the U.S. government once again is interfering in matters and attacking the sovereignty of Venezuela. Last December 22, as you said, two ships sailed in Guyanese territory, which is part of this claimed territory, Esequibo. But besides reporting this anti-sovereign position of these governments, also reported that ExxonMobil was not only going to perform an anti-seismic inspection, as they said in the illegal call, as the Venezuelan government said. There are other data that international media and analysts have emphasized that interferes between Venezuela and Guyana. On December 3, this U.S. company, ExxonMobil, made the last finding of a new oil well that has a special characteristic, which is that it could raise a production of more than 700,000 barrels per day by 2025. So it would not only be a political dispute or between countries, but what is at stake, as several analysts have said. In Esequibo, several natural resources are at stake, oil wells and other types of minerals that in the judgment of Venezuela, the United States wants to take over through different media. Venezuela continues protesting and defending its sovereignty with Guyana, but Venezuela is demanding respect, as well as other organizations. ALBA and TCP has expressed its support to the government of Venezuela to defend its sovereignty and raising its voice in the claim zone Esequibo. Thank you, Luis, for your data. The position of ALBA TCP. When we presented Luis, we were saying that Venezuela was questioning the interference of the two ships of ExxonMobil, especially because what it has to do with sovereignty and violation of international law. Why, if the parties signed a treaty in 1996 in Geneva, whereby both acknowledged the existence of a dispute and agreed to find a peaceful solution and in benefit of both, because nothing is solved yet. It is why the UN mediation took place. We will have a small pause to continue analyzing.
Les decía que Misión Verdad, portal venezolano de
Misión Verdad, Venezuelan webpage, has several publications on our critical move today related to Esequibo. And we ask energy occupation in the Caribbean. This work is called ExxonMobil Accelerates its plans to take away Venezuelan oil. In 2015, Exxon ratified that this block had a significant amount of oil, especially in Lisa Uno well on the Esequibo coast, which is in claim, and has
para que la corporación
it
desarrolle
is
acciones. Según The
important
Washington
to
Post, el gerente
say that
general
these oil
de ExxonMobil,
operations
quien fue
are
secretario
legal
de
in
Estado de
this
Estados Unidos,
territory,
Rex
is what
Tillerson,
they say.
comentó a los accionistas que ese
Rex
pozo fue el más
Tillerson said
grande
that the
hallazgo
well was
petrolero
the
de
largest
2015,
oil finding in
valorando la importancia estratégica
2015,
que tiene el
considering
Esequibo para esa
its
corporación y poder
strategic
expandir sus
importance for
operaciones
that
petroleras en
corporation to
Latinoamérica
expand
y el
its
Caribe.
oil
Estos son los
activities in
datos
Latin America.
que nos da
This is
que suman
another data to
el
analyze this
diferendo
matter.
entre las
The
repúblicas
difference
cooperativas de
between
Guyana, Guatemala y
Guyana
Venezuela
and
sobre el territorio del
Venezuela
Esequibo, que
on
eso no ocurre de
Esequibo
vieja
is an
data, aún sin
old
resolución
dispute
definitiva,
that
como
has
ya
not been
referíamos.
solved,
En
as
la
we
época
said.
colonial y
In
poscolonial, ese
colonial and
territorio fue
post-colonial
controlado
times,
por los
that
imperios de
territory
España,
was
Holanda y Gran
controlled by
Bretaña,
Spain,
pero una vez independiente de España, Venezuela
Netherlands, and Great
decidió irse
Britain.
a
But
Argentina para recuperar
after
esa porción de
the
territorio
independence
que,
from
como
Spain,
decíamos,
Venezuela decided to
considera le
recover
fue
this
robada por las
territory
firmas
that it
comerciales de
considered was robbed with political and judicial games. In 1824, when it was a British colony, Guyana recognized that the Venezuela's border was on the eastern side of the Esequibo River, since that territory had been historically colonized by the Kingdom of Spain. Nevertheless, years later, the British Kingdom established, without legal basis, another border on this side because the British wanted to occupy the mouth of Orinoco River on Venezuelan territory. This caused claims for Venezuela until a court represented by two United States and Venezuela, British and French, issued the award of Paris in 1889 that was issued in favor of the British Kingdom that awarded 90% of the Esequibo territory to the British Kingdom. Venezuela felt pillaged and refused this award. In 1949, a document was revealed and showed that one of the lawyers that acted in favor of Venezuela in Paris, promoted by the feeling of guilt, left some kind of a will where he explained that Fyodor Martin, Russian judge, proposed an agreement without any legal basis to give advantage to Great Britain. After this reveal, Venezuela denounced this arbitral award before the United States. But in 1966, they signed the Agreement of Geneva, whereby the parties acknowledged the existence of a claim and commit to negotiate between each other to reach a mutually beneficial and friendly agreement. After Guyana was gained independence from the UK, they have reached any results. In 2018, Antonio Guterres referred the case to the Hague Court, but Venezuela refused this action. On February 18, the Venezuelan Assembly approved an agreement for the legitimate and sovereign rights of the country over Esequibo.
Seguidamente, sumamos la
We will
visión de
now
dos
add the
analistas.
vision
Miguel
of two
Jaimez,
analysts,
doctor en
Miguel
ciencias
Jaimez,
es magíster en ciencias políticas,
Master in
experto en
Political
geopolítica,
Science,
enlaza
expert
con
in
nosotros desde los Andes,
geopolitics
y
from
estamos
Los
intentando
Andes.
mejorar la comunicación
We are now
con
trying
Juan
to
Romero,
improve the
historiador,
communication
politólogo,
with
docente
Juan
universitario,
Romero,
doctor en
historian,
procesos políticos contemporáneos en
politologist,
América Latina,
and
con décadas de
expert in
estudio, le
Latin
tenemos
American
y le podemos ver en
matters.
pantalla. Comienzo con Miguel.
I start with
Miguel,
Miguel.
lo del fin de semana
What
ha sido una
happened this
táctica de
weekend is
provocación, de desgaste, con motivación geopolítica.
a geopolitical tactic.
De nuevo, el gobierno guyanés
The
está
Guyana
en serios
government is in serious problems
producto
once
de
again
que la coalición
because the
política que ha
political
llevado al poder
coalition
al
that
actual
took
mandatario,
the current president
ahora todas
to
sus
office
intenciones de permanecer en la presidencia de la República se van desmejorando.
have
Esto
proved
parte
that
lucida
their
por
intentions of
el
remaining in
voto
power
para
are
adelantar las
falling.
elecciones que la Cámara de Representantes ha dado y que tiene que
The Chamber
convocarse
of Representatives
dentro de
have
90
called new
días. Y cada
elections
vez
and
digo que esta
will call
región
them in 90
está
days.
en problemas,
Each time
entonces
this
hace
region
mano
is in
de su
problems, they
más
use
cercano país limítrofe como es Venezuela. Y no se han hecho
border
esperar
problems with
los
Venezuela.
enfrentamientos diplomáticos en alianza con la
Confrontations have
Hay que recordar
taken
que el
place with
presidente
Exxon.
ExxonMobil, quien opera como una operadora política acá en la región. ¿Y quién es la que ha
Must
llevado
understand that
adelante los
Exxon
principalísimos, ha financiado los principalísimos pocos entendimientos en contra de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela? Detrás de ella también está la Chevron, que también es otra operadora política. Quienes
Exxon,
ven
there is
que
another
el
political operator that see that the
que tuvieron con
refuge
este mandatario
they
ahora
had
se
with this
desmorona y que
president
exactamente
is
el
falling,
llamado a
and
elecciones lo
the
va
call
a
for
colocar
elections will
en
place
desventaja, producto de que hay
him in
otras corrientes políticas
disadvantage
allí en
because
la
there are
región
other
que
political
están
currents in the
reclamando
region
la
that are
total
claiming
entrega de la
the
soberanía
complete
de aquel pequeño
sale of
país a
sovereignty
las
of that
transnacionales
small
al
country
servicio de las transnacionales norteamericanas. Por eso reaccionan los Estados Unidos de una manera tan violenta como lo han hecho en las últimas 72 horas en contra de Venezuela y se mueven a
they are
nivel de
moving
consenso
in a
en el CARICOM y
consensus
se
in
mueven
the
a nivel
CARICOM,
de intentar otras sanciones
and they
en
have tried
contra
other
del país.
sanctions
Todo
against
indica,
Venezuela.
todo señala
Everything
que la
is
presidencia de la
pointing to say
actual
that the
mandatario
current
se desborona,
president
cae,
president is
se cae a
falling
pedazos, a
to
tolete. Y
pieces.
bueno, hacen más,
And
como lo decía
they
anteriormente,
take hand,
para
as I
tratar
said
de
before,
zafarse
to
o
try
desviar
to save
la
themselves or
atención
try to
de
deviate the
las
attention
muy malas
from the
relaciones que
very
hay
poor
con la República
relations
de Venezuela.
they have with the Republic of
Entonces, a Juan
Venezuela.
Romero, historiador, politólogo y docente universitario. Gracias,
Thank
Miguel.
you,
Si lo que ocurre internamente
Miguel.
en la República
Juan
Cooperativa de
Romero.
Guyana, es decir, esta
What is
versión del
happening
Sur,
inside
impulsada por el
Guyana
Partido
is being
Progresista del
promoted
Pueblo,
by
que
the
disolvió de
Progressive
forma
Party of the
inédita
people
el
that dissolved
gobierno hasta hace nada vigente, encabezado por David
the
Granger,
government of
podría
David
marcar un
Granger.
cambio
Could this
en la
mark a
senda que hasta
change
ahora han
on
transitado
the
las dos naciones
road
bolivianas,
that
al
both
menos, digo,
nations have
retornar a tiempos del
walked
comandante Hugo Chávez, en los que
in
las
these last
relaciones
years, and
bilaterales
at
eran
least
mucho
go
mejores,
back
¿no?, entre
to
Venezuela y
the
Guyana.
times of Commander Chavez, where we had best relations. The Progressive Party of the People have historically had a quite friendly relation with the government of Venezuela, contrary to the political party that until now is supporting the president. In my opinion, this will create a dispute. We must also understand that the nature of the Progressive People's Party, of military,
un asesor del Centro Hemisférico de Estudio de la Defensa de los Estados Unidos, perfectamente con él, su campaña presidencial además determinante.
He has a decisive presence of the United States and ExxonMobil. They have huge strategic interests in the zone. You may remember that there has been support to ExxonMobil proposal that violates the Geneva Agreement in its item 5. That says that no exploration can take place, and neither party, neither Guyana or Venezuela could explore or grant concessions without the mutual consent. Since 2013, 14, 15, and with support of ExxonMobil, the discovery of ISA 1 and ISA 2 that have been granted to Exxon, there has been huge problems with which the Progressive People's Party has demanded the mechanisms to resolve the problem, a completely different position. And appease what have been tensions between both countries and Venezuela's opposition to the violation of its sovereignty. But there is a way to reach an amicable agreement without resorting to the Hague. We must also say that the aggressive position that my peer Miguel was saying should be understood, because ExxonMobil, through completely illicit concessions, have taken its proved reserve to 5 billion barrels of oil. ISA 1 and ISA 2 have the potential of creating that production. We have problems with communication from Zulia, the west of Venezuela. I want to go back to Los Andes while we try to improve the other communication. Miguel, both you and Juan have talked about the interests of transnational corporations that receive huge dividends and illegal concessions that the government of Guyana has granted. Directly or indirectly, it's a way of occupation with energy and geopolitical purposes. Rex Tillerson, former Secretary of State of the United States, never stopped being the ExxonMobil CEO between 2006 and 2016. Does this explain the attacks against Venezuela? Yes, and Lucia, and this is added to the act of other representatives who talk against Venezuela have been part of the U.S. State Department. The same happened with Mr. Obama, Mr. Bush, in former governments, which main representatives and members of the State Department and Security Department have been in the main concessions and businesses with Halliburton, Dick Cheney, who also executed the contract of ammunition in Iraq. And this same model is a mirror here in this region. We must remember that for the United States, the jewel of the crown is Venezuela because of its geographic position, to continue creating an international scenario after President Maduro takes office in 2019. All these aggressions we see and we are observing by countries of the region addressed or conducted by the foreign affairs in Colombia, in Argentina, in Chile, Brazil, foreign affairs in Spain against Venezuela. So this is the activation of several governments trying to seek an unbalance in the region, and by all means to overthrow the Bolivarian revolution. This is why all these attacks are not casual. This is why all these attacks are addressed and are part of a plan of what the United States have considered a strategic plan to bring down the government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. What we see, the situation of Guyana and the Colombian president asking other countries to join and not acknowledge President Maduro in 2019. It's not to ignore President Maduro. These governments have always ignored the majesty and the weight that Venezuela has in international organizations and the relations we are holding in UNASUR, in ECLAC, and Petrocaribe itself. So this country has serious historic problems, as my peer Romero just said. has historic problems with for centuries because of an extension of more than 160,000 square kilometers. And all historic facts agree that this 75% of this region belongs to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Well, it allies, as it did before, with ExxonMobil, Chevron, to carry out attacks against Venezuela, aimed to get financing from the State Department, and for the president to make weak declarations that justify a confrontation between these two nations. We must be very careful. Our diplomatic department now must be very careful. They are very special, important moments. This closure of the 2018, the first steps must be very careful as of 2019 because they are looking for an intervention in Venezuela. This aspect of Guyana is a smokescreen to try to fragment the sovereignty and governance in Venezuela. They are seeking the way to enter the cannons, which is the weaker part of our border, and they will have any alteration that we've never lived before. These are very important moments for us, but I also say that we will come out successful as the Venezuelan government has always done. And Foreign Affairs and National President has decisively acted against this infiltration by this government under a ridiculous pretext, unprecedented in history, which they want to oppose us with Guyana. I would like to retake a question we had before the first pause. How was UN's mediation? This goodwill mediation established in the Geneva Agreement in 1966. Yes, and in spite of the international agenda, United Nations have managed, or an important group of the members of this organization have acknowledged the balance where Venezuela and Colombia and the case of Guyana shall remain. But we can't trust completely some decisions made according to the discrete opinion of United Nations when it's about an intervention against another nation. We have seen this and analyzed, Lucia, in your program several times. Intervention in all nations of the hemisphere where the United States has interests. They are interested on what the United Nations has to say, and an organization that must be used for the respect, the consensus of nations. Nothing has been achieved. Unfortunately, United Nations are coercive, and unfortunately, they are under the mandate and threat of the United States of America. And any decision made by this organization in favor of any country to stop the war or intervention, the Security Council unilaterally, United States intervenes and does whatever they want in any place of the world. Just place the case of Syria, Damascus, that some hours ago were once again bombarded by Israeli rockets. And the United States cannot stop and ask the world where we are going to the global destruction of the planet just because president does not accept its resources to be in the hands of the Pentagon. But what should we do in those cases? As my peer well said, support in South America and the good relations of this organization that has currently told the Guyana president to leave, ask them to leave. It's true, we have had good relations in spite of this dispute we have. But looking at this situation, this is also the reflex of many organizations and governments and social movements that in Latin America that support the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Primero te pregunto, ¿y qué cabida podría tener la Corte Internacional de
And
Justicia de
the
la Haya
International
Países
Court
Bajos,
of
que por
Justice
eso
of the
está
Hague
empujando muchísimo la
that
República
is
Cooperativa de Guyana, o estuvo hasta hace nada el gobierno de David Granger? Incluso el secretario general de Naciones Unidas, Antonio Guterres, enviaba una comunicación al respecto y Venezuela
has been
decía, no nos parece que esto tenga cabida en la Corte
proposed by
Internacional de Justicia de la Haya.
many
¿Qué
organizations.
piensas tú?
What do you think of the role of this entity? Once again, it's a game of interest. There are times where the decisions of the International Court of The Hague is such a poor decision. It just gave to Bolivia's right to a sea outlet. The Chilean government mobilized millions of resources, lobbying, and they purchased judges and pressed. So they didn't have any way out to the sea, to Bolivia. So this is a sample of the interests in that international organization. Some decisions in a historical moment could have been praisable by the court, but the last decisions made by The Hague, it has accepted the word of international groups. We're talking that oil is the planet's largest economic force that displaces any type of government and presses on anybody because it has endless earnings. This is the oil royalty. When it is transformed in more than 3,000 byproducts, it becomes impressive. This is what they're playing with, because what is here at this time being decided are important reserves that will give money to many regions. Regions that they consider must continue having the planet's governance. This is why we see the abuses of United Nations and the Court of The Hague. This is why the acceptance of Washington and NATO. This is why there's a circle made of many countries, and we are in the eye of this terrible hurricane, because as everybody knows, and we have said and repeated and proved, Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves, and this unfortunately activates enemies and conflicts, which is what we are seeing in the last hours of 2018 with a small Latin American nation. Thank you, Miguel, for your intervention.
Hasta pronto, Miguel. Bueno, en el contexto geopolítico
in the geopolitical context in the region, according to what Miguel and the little we could hear from Juan Miguel, this dispute is not isolated. While the matter is resolved,
Mientras se resuelve la cuestión, Guyana
Guyana administrates the territory in Dispo on a de facto fashion because it is claimed sovereignly by the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and delivers very fruitful concessions to multinationals like ExxonMobil. When we come back from the pause, we will deepen in this crucial fact to understand what is happening.
La ocupación de Guayana,
Guyana's occupation of Esequibo, the zone called Esequibo or Esequibo Guyana, has been the story of several transnationals, especially ExxonMobil. The last decade has been key in this process for consortia that talk about a sound corporate performance. In May 2015, Mobil Exxon announced the discovery of one oil reserve in that area, part of the pillage of Venezuela. ExxonMobil is a key actor in the middle of the dispute. According to its news page, its income in 2017 raised more than 80%, and this year more than 50% regarding the immediate period, with an average earnings of $3 billion, that is $24 billion per year. These huge benefits result from the exploration, illegal exploitation of the Esequibo resources as shown in plain, as well as any other U.S. global corporation. It wants to defeat Venezuela geopolitically and geoeconomically, together with a country that, with its partners like Russia and China, are a main threat for the planet and have the world's main reserves. To assure these sources for 100 years not only allowed them to carry out with their arms race in the Middle East, but also have the global status that are now challenged by emerging partners. They have infrastructure, drilling, and called Lisa project that caused a diplomatic problem between Venezuela and Guyana. They are interested in taking over an oil hull that reaches Esequibo with an exclusive exploitation by Exxon. Nevertheless, this is the first move of ExxonMobil to accelerate its plans to exploit. In May 2017, FIPEN reported facts for engineering, acquisition, installation of band structures, and bridges associated to Lisa 1, according to War Oil. Now we have Francisco González, international lawyer from Caracas. Telesur talked about the Geneva Agreement 1966 that acknowledges Venezuela's sovereignty on Esequibo and annulled the Paris Agreement. Nevertheless, the Guyana government has violated the Geneva Treaty more than 15 times by granting concessions to foreign companies. Are these powerful interests that make them skip all kinds of legislation?
Saludos a todas y todos, gracias Lucía.
Greetings, Lucia.
Bueno, sí, lo que
yes, what we are looking at this time
is
in the global context of the attack against Venezuela, one more tragedy by the United States with regards to the natural resources that belong for many centuries to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. And in this case, the current government, David Ranger,
que vimos que acaba de
We
perder
saw
justo
that
el fin de semana
he
pasado
just
por un
lost
voto.
his position
Esa
by
mayoría
one
y esa
vote.
coalición
This
que en su Congreso
majority and
Nacional, lo
coalition
llaman Congreso Nacional del Pueblo, que es su partido de base, en esa macrocoalición política que es la dominante en este momento en Guyana, pues perdió esa hegemonía
lost the
de 65
hegemony of
escaños,
65
donde
seats,
tenían aproximadamente
where
32,
they
33
had
votos adicionales, que
33 votes
le
that
permitía
allowed
mantener su gobierno allí en
him
Guyana.
to keep
Y al
his
perder esa
government to
hegemonía y ese
Guyana.
voto de
And
confianza
after
que
losing
se da
this
el fin de
vote of
semana,
trust,
esa moción de
the
entonces, a
motion,
partir de ese momento, pues su gobierno se desmorona. Cae David Granger, y
David
Granger, al mismo tiempo
Granger
que un poco más atrás,
was
al
overthrown.
año 2000, de campaña electoral, donde fue muy promoviendo las reformas estructurales
They
y
promoted
la
the
apertura de
structural
mercados
reforms
hacia las
and the
inversiones,
opening
donde
of
ExxonMobil
markets
en
to
primera instancia fue
investments
la que
where
financió su campaña
Exxon
electoral.
financed
Entonces, en
his
2015 es donde vemos
electoral
que
campaign.
comienzan
So in
realmente los ataques a
2015, we
Venezuela.
see
Para
the
esto, nosotros
attacks
también
against
hacemos la
Venezuela.
invitación
For this,
a
we
ver
also
un
invite
discurso muy
to see a
importante
very important
de Barak
speech
Tajeo, que era el
of
gobierno
Barak
inmediatamente
Tahel, which
anterior
was
del
the
Partido
previous
Progresista
government
del
of the
Pueblo. En ese
Progressive
discurso
Party
del
of the
año
People.
2010, cuando
In
asume la
2010,
presidencia
when
pro
it
tempore de
assumes the pro
UNASUR, hablaba
tempore
de integración
presidency of
latinoamericana,
UNASUR,
hablaba de ir
he was
aguas
talking about
adentro, el
Latin
crecimiento de
American
los países
integration,
latinos
about the
contra la
people's
hegemonía de
growth
Estados Unidos. Entonces, es
against
importante ver un
the
poco la
U.S.
historia
hegemony.
reciente,
So this is a
porque en ese
little recent
pro
history
tempore
because
de
during
este
that pro
señor
tempore presidency
Tajeo, allí
of
vemos
Mr.
cómo
Tahel,
esa
we
integración
saw
latinoamericana, y en ese
how
momento
the Latin
Guayana se
American
llama,
integration,
hacia ese mecanismo de
Guyana
inversión como era la UNASUR.
saw
O sea, que
this
rompe inmediatamente al llegar al poder David Granger con su coalición
and
política que describimos anteriormente. Entonces
when he
vemos
took
cómo se
office, he
mueven las
breaks
aguas
his
en ese sentido.
promises.
En la actualidad, el fin de semana, cuando pierde esa hegemonía allí
During
en el
this weekend, when
Parlamento
we lost it, he
de
lost
Guyana,
hegemony in the
justamente es otra vez
Guyana
el
Congress.
expresidente
He
y
was,
que
it
fue
was once
presidente pro
again
tempore de UNASUR,
a former president, pro
integracionista,
tempore president
bolivariano,
of UNASUR,
pro-chavista y
Bolivarian,
pro-madurista, y que
pro-Chavist, and
estaba
pro-Maduro,
la
who
caída de
was
David Granger en este momento. Entonces, en ese sentido, vemos
behind
que esa
Granger's
macrocoalición,
fall at this
que
time.
posiblemente
So we
sea
see
la
that this
hegemónica en muy
macro
poco tiempo,
coalition
va a
that would
ser
probably
pro-venezolana y va a ser
hegemony in a short time, and it would be pro-Venezuela and pro-Latin American integration. I think this is the most relevant of this dispute. United States, of course, is behind all this dispute because of its attack to Venezuela, and
ese Congreso Nacional del Pueblo, que el Congreso Nacional no tiene nada, de su partido político, y por el otro lado, el partido de Duque, por el lado de Colombia.
we have this on one side, and on the other side, Duque in Colombia and Bolsonaro in Brazil. So we can see how the countries are moving. So on January 10, 2019, when President Maduro assumes its new mandate, all the forces are against his new mandate and against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and process.
Francisco, a modo de cierre, porque nos queda muy poquito.
We have a
preocupaciones
short
energéticas,
time.
forma de desestabilización o
Energy
fragmentación
occupation and
regional.
form of regional destabilization. Of course, in this case, we're going to see that the ExxonMobil ships that erupted in the waters are aimed even for military purposes, because surely these ships have technologies to analyze Venezuelan sea for a possible future attack. So we can see how the United States and the direct interests of the State Department and transnationals against Venezuela are inspecting Venezuelan jurisdiction.
Muchísimas gracias, Francisco.
Thank you very much, Francisco.
Hasta pronto, pues gracias, hasta luego.
Chao, Francisco, gracias por este tiempo, muy amable. Bueno, pasemos a nuestras ideas
Let's now go
conclusivas.
to
La
our
disputa
conclusions.
territorial entre
The
Venezuela y
territorial
Guyana
dispute
cruza,
between Venezuela and
atraviesa
Guyana
transversalmente varias
crosses
dimensiones.
several
En primer
dimensions.
término, la
First,
histórica
the
reclamación en una
historic
zona rica
claim
en
of a
recursos
zone
naturales,
rich in
incluido el
natural
petróleo, el
resources,
incorporación
including
mundial en
oil,
el que países
in a
OPEP y
world
aliados de la
context
OPEP
where
han acordado
OPEC and
reducir la
non-OPEC
producción
countries have
para
agreed to reduce
revitalizar
production
los bajos
to
precios.
revitalize the
Estados
low
Unidos y
prices.
sus aliados
The United
procuran
States and its
tener
allies seek
acceso
to
y
have
control
access
a
and
potenciales
control
países
of,
petroleros
to
que
potential
puedan
oil countries
garantizar
that
el
could
envío de crudo
guarantee
barato,
the
como
submittal
es el
of
caso de la
cheap
República
crude,
Cooperativa de
which is
Guyana.
the case
Claro,
of Guyana.
está por ver si esos
We
recursos
still
son de
must see if
Guyana,
these
viendo la
resources
disputa que
belong
está
to
presente.
Guyana, looking at this
Esta
dispute.
controversia se enmarca
This
también en una
dispute is
estrategia
also
estadounidense de
included
aislar a
in
la
a
región
U.S.
de
strategy of
Bolivia-Guayana, tanto
isolating
financiero como en lo territorial.
Venezuela,
Los
both in the
resultados de las
financial
elecciones
and
presidenciales
territorial
en
levels.
2018, tanto
The
en Colombia como
results
en
of
Brasil,
2018
dan
elections
fuertemente
in
declarado
Colombia and
asedio
Brazil
a Venezuela
show
desde
a
fronteras hacia el sur
declared
y hacia el
attack
oeste.
against
Y para la
Venezuela.
estabilidad de la región
And
es
for the
clave
region's
el desenlace que pueda
stability,
tener la
the
reciente
results
moción
of the
contra el
recent
presidente
motion
David
against
Granger, quien
David
sucederá en el
Granger
gobierno,
and
más aún
who
si
will
incorporamos el hecho
succeed
de
in
que
the
para el próximo abril
government,
de 2019
especially if we
se
consider
cumplen
that
las
for
fechas límite tope
2019
para que Venezuela
is
presente
the
alegatos en
top
esta
date
reclamación
for
de
Venezuela
Venezuela.
2%
El diferendo por la
allegations
Guyana o
in
por
this
la
historic
Guayana
dispute.
Esequiba,
The
por tanto,
differendum
implica
for
no solo una
Esequiba
disputa territorial
implies not
aislada entre
only
dos países,
isolated
sino sobre
territorial
todo una
dispute,
pieza más
but
en el
especially
complejo
one
y
more
tan
piece in
cambiante
the
equilibrio de
complex
poderes
and
en el
changing
ámbito
balance of
regional,
powers
también
in the
mundial.
region
Así
and
llegamos al
world.
final de esta jugada crítica. Como
We
siempre,
have
gracias por
concluded
acompañarnos
our
y confiar en
critical
nosotros.
move.
Hasta
Thank
una
you for
próxima
being
oportunidad. Nos
with
vemos mañana a
us,
partir de las
and
12
we'll
con
meet
30 horas de
tomorrow
Colombia.
again at this time.